Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, Jon Chee. In our last episode, we talked with Jason about his early entrepreneurial journey, including his formative years and the pivotal experiences that shaped his approach to leadership and innovation. If you missed it, be sure to go back and listen to part 1. In part 2, Jason takes us through his journey of launching Ori Biotech in Europe, navigating cultural differences, and overcoming the regulatory complexities of scaling a biotech company globally. We'll dive into his reflections on building a mission-driven culture, fostering strong teams, and creating scalable solutions to make life-saving therapies more accessible.
I can't even imagine, as you're, moving out of, Richmond, Virginia and going to London, like that is like almost it's a blank slate. You're going to have to there's like cultural norms and all of that. And you're like, in addition to all the business kind of how do we just get this thing set up? Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about touching down in London kind of, and what were the early days like as you were just getting situated there?
I give my wife tons of credit.
Yeah.
I moved over 3 or 4 months ahead of the family. She was, as I said, 5 months pregnant, got the house ready for sale. I was gallivanting around Europe, trying to set up a business. And she was all alone with a 2-year-old. So all the credit goes to her. But we ended up landing in London in the summer of 2010. I was, again, the second, third, fourth employee in the kind of international business at that point. And we were, every week going from Madrid to Munich to Milan, going to try and figure out different countries, figure out the norms there. And, we Americans, we're not known for our subtlety. We sort of stomp around with big boots. And, I learned to shut my mouth and to listen. My grandmother used to always say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that ratio. Yeah. So you learn to listen a lot and try and be observant and to try and, fit into that cultural norm, whatever it is, which for me at that stage was constantly changing. People in Northern Europe do business very differently than people in Southern Europe, different pace. First time they cracked open 3 bottles of red wine at lunch in Milan, I was like, what is going on here? I'll be asleep by, it was probably 2 o'clock. I'll be asleep by 3. So, just the pace of things, how they make decisions. Again, no matter what culture you're in, it's all about people. But those norms are quite different. And so it was an incredible experience for a kid who really hadn't spent much time internationally. I did the kind of obligatory backpacking trip around Europe for a month and saw, a little bit of a lot of things, but I'd never traveled much internationally at all. And so, landing in London, I had never been to London when I landed there for the first time. So it was a great eye-opening experience and learning experience. And now we've been in London for 14 years, believe it or not. And that's incredible. Wow. The longest we've lived anywhere. Yeah. Other than my family home growing up. So it's, London's become home for us. And, that experience was fantastic. We built the team from 3 or 4 of us to 250 people in Europe, and sort of ex-US. So that was a hub in Singapore, and we had business in 37 countries, listed that company, on the LSE in 2014. It's now called Indivior, still a FTSE 250 company, still serving, many of those 37 countries globally, over 1,100 people in that business when we listed it. So we went from 5 of us to 1,100 over 10 years. And it was a incredible journey, and had, 2 startup experiences basically in the same company on 2 different continents.
Whoa. Okay. So I want to there's so many directions I want to go, and I'm just super fascinated. So I guess first thing, when you were tasked with just running Europe, did you have any mentors in Europe that could give you any sort of guidance, or were you just feeling around in the dark?
So the guy who hired me into Europe was the head of Europe, and he was a Brit who had spent a bunch of time in Australia. And the company, we had licensed the product somewhere along the way to Shearing Plow. And Shearing Plow marketed the product in a couple countries. So there's a little bit of infrastructure for the first generation product. But then Merck bought Shearing Plow. Merck wasn't interested in this franchise at all. So Reckitt's decided, actually my boss made the business case to buy the business back from Merck or Shearing Plow and then Merck. And we inherited teams in many countries, and we had to decide, do we want the team? Do we not want the team? Do we want the business there or not want the business? Do we close it down? The employment laws in Europe are very complicated. It's very difficult to get rid of people if you want to close down a business. So, I mean, that was an incredible baptism by fire, just really, trying to understand not only the cultural norms and business norms, but the rules and the regulations and the status of the business. And so it was an awesome experience. And luckily had Dave as a mentor, the head of Europe, who had spent a little bit of time, sniffing around. But, we were, as the CEO used to say, we were building the ship while we were sailing it. So it's you had to figure out some things along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the navigating not only just like cultural differences, but just like there's probably like way different tax rules. There's way different like legal kind of regimes. You're just like, and you have to kind of like orchestrate all those things.
Supply chain, finance, legal, like so much complexity. Yeah, for sure.
So much complexity. It reminds me of your project back in Colombia, honestly. It really does.
It was a more complicated project than that.
Yeah, more complicated and way more on the line. But like the seeds of it, I can see where it kind of that's really, really fascinating. And it sounds like you were able to like really kind of accelerate and put gas on this and really ultimately in the culmination of like an IPO. Can you talk about that? Like, that's like the startup dream, right? It's like go start the company. Whoop. And then just like, let's ring the bell. Like, let's do this. Like, can you talk a little bit like the run up to that?
I remember sort of ringing the bell at the LSE like it was yesterday. I have a great picture of the management team up there, and one of those kind of bucket list moments. And maybe at some point I'd love to do it on NASDAQ as well, but we'll see if that dream gets realized. But it was an incredible journey, and it was a traditional startup experience, with the exception that we were part of a parent company, and so we didn't have to go out and fundraise. And so those lessons came later in my journey, but. All of that culture building, all of that recruiting talent, those strategic decisions you have to make was all part of that journey. And, training those first couple hundred salespeople. And, it was an incredible learning ground and opportunity for me to, just figure out what I was good at, what I liked, what I could do, what I couldn't do. I have some incredible friends from that business who I never met before. Some of them are from Germany or from the Nordic countries. Some from Italy, some from Spain. We really had nothing in common when it started. But we built this business together, and they're still fantastic friends and great relationships. So, again, coming back to the theme, and it's all about the people. We hired great people. They did great work. They were passionate about the impact they could have for patients. And so that drove us. And we had a big patient impact and a good financial impact for our investors. Ultimately, the Reckitt's it was interesting. We grew so big within Reckitt. So Reckitt's a giant company. It's like 30,000 employees. It's, FTSE 10. It's a massive company. And because they basically sell household goods, which are generally low margin, we were 10% of sales, or about 4% of sales, but 25% operating profit. Like, they had to start breaking us out separately because they're like, what is this weird business over here that's generating all cash? It looks nothing like the business analysts are like, what's happening over there? Yeah. And so they faced the strategic decision to either sell the business or spin it out. And we sort of did a spin out, kind of quasi MBO, to try and get the business out from under that's, fast moving consumer good parent into a specialty pharma company. And that was successful, listed on the LSE. I think they're trying to dual list or have already done on NASDAQ. And again, still a going concern today, and one of the leaders in addiction medicine still. And that's, very gratifying. We built something that's long lasting and helped millions of patients at this point. And got to see that process happen from the inside, the IPO process, the IPO roadshow. castle intrigue going on behind the scenes and the management team and all those
Yeah.
things. Um, so yeah, it was great. I think preparation for what came next, but also I think for me, I learned about myself that I was much happier at the earlier building phase than that kind of trying to manage a large public traded company is just it's a totally different beast. Going from 5 to 400, going from 3 to 250, inside the same company was much more my speed. And then you get to a company where you're public and there's 1,000 people, and it didn't feel the same. It wasn't for me any longer. And after the IPO, about a year and a half, I left after 10 and a half years in that business.
What an experience. I guess, being stuck in the Bay Area since forever.
Stuck in that 7 mile perimeter. You're like on the Truman Show.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the kind of, I think, startup entrepreneurial kind of like zeitgeist out here, at least, it's like, there's a lot of first-time founder energy, like screw big companies, kind of just like, but everything I'm hearing sounds like a kind of a master class of entrepreneurship within a large organization. And like, I'm jealous. That sounds incredible. Like, we're not a 250 person company, but like being able to do that. And I think, I guess for any listener out there, it seems like you don't have to be the Zuckerberg of kind of, you don't have to like that archetype is not the only way.
The Bill Gateses, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musks, or the guys that are 0 to 1 guys, but also 1 to 5,000 or 1 to 10,000 employee guys are incredibly rare. They're like more rare than unicorns or gals. It's just like, it just doesn't happen. Like, what I learned as part of that experience is I'm not a 0 to 1 guy. Like the guy who founded Ori, I always joke, he's like, Doc Brown, he fell off the toilet and hit his head and invented the flux capacitor. He's like one of those people that has these ideas. He's incredibly creative, sees angles that people don't see. That's not me. I'm just not that guy. But I can help you if you have that great idea. I can help you turn it into something, turn it into a business, commercialize it, build a company around it, raise money, operationalize, that stuff I'm good at. And then at some point, I probably, again, if I'm successful, put myself out of a job. I'm probably the 1 to 500. I'm not 500 to 5,000, because that guy or gal is going to be really good at process and really good at building big organizations and big structures. And that drives me crazy. So, it's like, know yourself, it's like, figure out what you're good at, where you can add value, and try and focus there, and don't try and be Zuckerberg, because he's a unicorn. Like somebody that can build that kind of enterprise from zero is very unusual. And one of the lessons I learned at Endivir, just to kind of share with your listeners, which I think is incredibly, incredibly important, is the power of culture. The kind of snide, witticism is culture eats strategy for breakfast, or whatever the kind of phrase is. But people that genuinely care about the mission of the company will do incredible things. They will, they will do incredible things against the largest odds. Really building a culture. It's easy in healthcare. It's easy for us because, we're trying to bring cures for cancer to everyone in the world. I mean, this is something that is easy to get out of bed for. But that culture that you build inside the organization is the most important thing about your company. It is the most important thing that will drive success. It is the most important thing that differentiates you from your competitors. It isn't ours is better than theirs. Ours does this and theirs doesn't. And I think that is such an important lesson. I learned it at Endivir. We had a very unique culture in that business. So you see culture over time. Culture is a living animal. It's a living organism, and it absorbs new people, and it shapes the culture, and it moves in various directions. But you have to be very intentional about how you shape a culture at different stages of the company, what kind of people you bring in at different stages that will shape the culture for you. One of the great business books that I've read that I really think is very telling on this topic is No Rules by Reed Hastings. So Netflix is well known to have a very unique culture, one of kind of radical transparency and one where they strive to have very, very high levels of talent density. And that means, a lot of different things. But that's the one business book that I read cover to cover and then flipped it over and started reading again from the beginning because I thought it was that interesting and that sort of insightful. And I modeled some things, not all things, but some things in the culture at Ori around certainly the lessons I learned at Indivior, but also, some of these pieces of the puzzle, that book from Reed. I think Dan Pink's work is super interesting on what motivates people, and the power of incentives. People, everyone has worked for a company that has KPI driven bonus schemes, right? So you do these three things and you get another 10% or 15% or 20% on your base salary. And he's basically proven through a tremendous amount of research that carrot and stick incentives like that cause worse performance, not better, which is a totally counterintuitive finding, and something that I believe to be true, but not many people that I know do. Almost every company that I've ever worked for and that I know anything about remains having those kinds of carrot and stick incentive programs, those KPI driven programs. So it's a super interesting. He wrote a book called Drive, all about this. It's a really interesting book. So, you take these things along the way, these experiences, and you sort of put them together, hopefully in a way that makes sense to you and helps shape whatever that next, lily pad is that you're going to hop to.
Absolutely. And that, like, I was just like fist pumping in my head when I was hearing that, because like, I think the cultural element is so important, because like, I always think about starting a business and running a business is there's a long time horizon, and inevitably there's going to be bumps in the road, probably some really big bumps. And if you are purely motivated by coin, usually you might jump ship the second that it gets really tough, and perhaps the coin opportunity has been jeopardized. Not to say, I mean, I'll kind of like caveat what I'm saying here too, is that there are large organizations that are purely coin operated, that are also functioning at a high level. But that's, for me, I think, not something where I would thrive in. But I think something too is that you talk about like intentional design of culture is knowing exactly that. Like, do we want to set up the coin operated like kind of culture, or do we want it to be kind of more like a mission driven? And these are like these dichotomies. I'm just trying to illustrate the polar ends of the spectrum, but it's kind of knowing that and designing it with intent, exactly what you said. That's critical.
Absolutely. I mean, Dan talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose, what actually motivates people. When you take money off the table and people feel, because people want to be treated fairly, right? If I'm worried about where my next meal is coming from, or if I can pay my rent, I'm going to be focused on that, the base layer of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But once you get beyond that, people want to be treated fairly. Am I getting fairly valued for the contribution I'm making? And if that's the answer to that question is yes, then it's other things that motivate me. I don't think I'm going to hire someone at Ori. If I pay them 10 or 15% more, they're going to do that much better job. They're going to do the best job they can, because that's the people I hire. They're going to bust their ass to get the job done and go well above and beyond. So it's that kind of thinking, what they really want is autonomy. Am I self-directed? Can I drive my own future, my own, achieve my own goals? I don't want anybody micromanaging me. If I'm a top performer, mastery, am I learning? Am I, around peers who are teaching me, coaching me? Am I able to teach and coach as well? And purpose is what I'm doing have meaning. I remember a software engineer that I interviewed not that long ago said to me, I don't want them to write on my tombstone that I caused teenagers to spend 14 more minutes on TikTok. Like, literally, that's my job, is to tweak the algorithm to get people another, 2 minutes, another 1 minute, another 3 minutes. And like, I just, it's completely demotivating. That has no purpose in my life. And so, realizing what makes people tick, these things are, human things that we have to get. No one can deny that. Let's say pick Goldman Sachs, the vampire squid, think about, financial incentives out the wazoo. They're a tremendously successful organization. Is there a lot of loyalty there? Do people love working for Goldman Sachs? Would they sort of jump in front of a bus for Goldman Sachs? I'm not sure they would. But, you can't deny it's a successful organization. So there are different ways to build companies, but, one of my board members is a great lady who was a CEO in her own right and head of research for MSD, and she advises the FDA. She's, badass, basically, is what I'd call her. But she's like, the best thing about starting your own business is you get to design the business that you always wanted to work for. And that taking all those lessons along the way, the importance of culture, alignment of incentives, some of these things, and putting them into one business so far has worked very well for us. But as we said, culture is an evolving and ever-changing animal. So it has to evolve with the business and with the circumstances of the business. So it's exciting, forward-looking opportunity for us.
Absolutely. It's interesting what your board member said too, because like that element of design of culture was like a massive like driving force, or like something that gets me fired up about Exceeder and starting Exceeder. And this was back in 2011, but like I did a stint in like consulting and a law firm.
Mm-hmm.
I basically had a crap, like I was like, oh, this is crap culture. Like this is off. Like this is awful. Like I'll give you an example. We were like terrified of the CEO whenever he would be in the office.
Yep.
And so we had ties in the little drawer. Anytime he's like, oh, he's in, everyone just like getting ready, because like that's what matters, right? Like that's what matters. So when thinking about designing Exceeders, exactly, we at least knew what we didn't want it to be like.
Okay.
Like
let's equally important. Yeah. You know even if you don't know what you want it to be, as long as you know what you don't want it to be, you can sort of work it out as you go.
Yeah, exactly. So now, you've said, okay, I want to get back to the earlier stages of company building. I'm not so interested in getting this thing to 5,000. What was up next for you after that experience?
So I left Indivior after 10 and a half years, kind of a year and a half after the IPO. We made a lot of money for Reckitt and for their investors, which was a good thing. Made a little bit of money for the management team as well. I was in a position where I didn't have to rush into finding the next job, but it wasn't, I can go sit on the beach and drink, martinis or pina coladas or whatever you drink on. So I started really just getting involved in the venture ecosystem in London. At this point I was in London. My wife and I said, okay, we'll give ourselves a year. And if we can find something that, puts food on the table and keeps us happy in London, we'll stay here. And if not, we'll probably move back to Virginia and find a real job, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But I'd spent, at that point, 6.5 years in London, and a lot of our network was here. And, but I'd been head down, building this business and traveling all the time. And so I really had to kind of restart the network and really just get involved. So I didn't know anyone really in London. It's certainly not in the venture ecosystem. So started, going out and meeting people and, having a coffee, even though I don't drink coffee, having a coffee and saying, who should I meet? Who's the next 2 people I should go see? And they'd make an introduction and I'd go see those 2 people and 2 more people. And that turned into 4, which turned into 16, which turned into, and just built a network that way. I was lucky to get a kind of temporary consulting gig with KKR, working on a business that they had bought, which was in the healthcare space, and got to know some investors in the space. Started investing also as an angel, which helped give me sort of some street cred in the venture ecosystem, putting some skin in the game. And this is late 16, through 17. Started investing full time with a family office, which was interesting. But all the while just trying to, basically looking for interesting businesses and smart people that I could help solve big problems. And sometimes that was as an investor, sometimes it was as an advisor. I sat on a couple of boards, and I still do. I sit on the board of 4 companies that I've invested in that are portfolio companies, and just trying to add value. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I didn't ask for anything back. I just said, if I can help, let me know. And I'm happy to connect you to anyone that I know, or to give you some free advice, or we can do a whiteboarding session on your commercial strategy. The few things that I knew that were applicable to a startup. But, I think particularly in healthcare, and this might be true and broadly in tech, you get a lot of technologists or clinicians or scientists that start businesses in this area. And they're very, very good at their domain of expertise. So they're often bring a perspective on the problem. They've identified a problem and they have a domain expertise that they think can either solve the problem or can develop a technology, and then they go and try and find a problem to solve with that technology. That's the most kind of common phenotype that I see of health tech, at least startups. What they don't have usually is operational experience, commercial experience, fundraising experience. Those are things that they lack. And oftentimes some of that EQ we talked about earlier, they also lack. And so,
or they don't even want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. They either know they don't have it and don't want to do it, or don't know they don't have it and that they need it. But either way, they need it. And so someone's got to do it. So,
yeah.
Trying to add value where I could. And a lot of it was pro bono, keeping some food on the table through various consulting gigs and whatever. And met the team at Ori as a potential investor, actually, through an investor friend of mine. I made pretty good inroads into the investor networks in London, Cambridge, Oxford, the kind of golden triangles they call it. And Ori was a very, very so over that kind of from mid 2016 to late 2018, when I met Ori, whatever that is that 2.5 years or so. I saw something like 5,000 health tech businesses, health tech investment opportunities. It was a very large number.
Yeah.
And I invested in a handful, let's call it maybe 10. And not one did I pledge my full human capital to. And that wasn't the goal. The goal was to build kind of a portfolio career and see if I could help businesses and help, get startups at the ground. But I met Ori and I was just blown away by the incredible potential of personalized living medicine. So we can actually turn human immune cells into cures for cancer. Isn't that incredible to say that we can actually do that? And it's great for humanity. And I was blown away. I mean, this is, new science. I've been working in pharmaceuticals since 2006, in healthcare since 2003. Never heard of cell therapy before, 2018. But it had been, obviously one of those overnight successes that had taken 30 years. Was blown away by the potential. First application was in cancer. We were seeing results in blood cancer, like leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, that were unprecedented. Literally curing late-stage patients that had weeks to live. They'd failed everything. They'd failed chemotherapy multiple rounds. They'd failed a bone marrow or, transplant of some kind. They were on their last option. And these cell therapies were curing them at very, very high rates, some in the 90%. So you think the very sickest people, they're literally weeks or maybe months away from death, are getting cured of cancer. And I'm like, this is incredible. Why doesn't everyone know about this? How is this the first time that I'm hearing about this? This actually exists. The first products were approved in 2017. So, this time it was like 2018, 2019. I hadn't heard about it. Even now I run into many, many people who, if you walk down the street, are like, have you ever heard of CAR T therapy? People are like, what? So, this idea that, wow, we can actually cure cancer. And I'm like, well, this has to happen. Like, I have to get involved somehow. I have to help. So I offered to invest and took the management team as it was currently constituted out to help, fundraise and introduce them to some of my friends in London. And we managed to put together a seed round for them. It was a $10 million seed round, which closed in 2019. And as part of that, I lost my mind and pledged not only my financial capital, my human capital as well to the business. And here I am 5 years later. It feels like 5 minutes. 5 years later, still in the business. So yeah, that's how I got kind of from the end of the Indivior experience to the beginning of the Ori Biotech experience.
Very cool. And I guess, first question I have is like, you mentioned that like you had the startup experience, but that was kind of within or under the wing of a larger org. But now there's no larger org. Can you talk about those early days? Like where it's like you're truly like building the plane as you're trying to like fly it.
I was the third or fourth employee in this business, joining the founding team, basically. Very, very deep domain expertise on the founding team. Again, some of those elements that I had done in the past, the marketing, the commercialization, the branding, the sales, the fundraising was a new experience for me, but I had been on the other side as an investor, which makes that jump easier. It looks like in the picture, it looks like on the hand.
Yeah, just the floating hand.
That's
yeah.
That's funny. So, I thought I could add value in various ways. And we started with culture. We started with brand. What do we want this company to be? And building what Ori Biotech meant. So our tagline, which you may be able to see under the logo there, but it's on my jacket as well. It says manufacturing brighter futures. We're a manufacturing technology company. We could have said engineering great machines, engineering great cell therapies. But ultimately what we're doing is what we're all trying to do in our therapeutics developer partners as well, is trying to impact patients. So it's, how do we think about our role in the world? What does Ori want to be when it grows up? What is our passion? What is our big purpose? And we started there and really trying to develop that and think about that. And that translated into some VC funding, which translated into, an engineering program and our own team. And we're now 83 people and have just launched our first product this year, which is going to hopefully be used in the first clinical trials in 2025 and treat the very first patients with the next generation of cell therapies, which will be an incredibly happy moment for me when we get there that we saw it out to do, 5.5 years ago.
Very cool. And, congratulations on the product launch. And as you were kind of like, I'm sure you're like scoping out the market, seeing what the status quo and kind of what your like kind of your guys' competitive edge and differentiation is. Can you talk a little about, like, I guess, what is the status quo and what is it for those out there? Like, what is the state of the market and how is Ori approaching it differently?
Yeah, and it's really the kind of the tale of two halves. I mean, I think when I joined the company and met them in 2018, joined full time in 2019, we didn't know it. We were on the cusp of an explosion in this area. So 2020, 21, something like, I don't know, I'll get the number wrong, but it was like $50 billion was invested in cell therapy alone in like 2 years. I mean, it was just an incredible culmination of the scientific proof of concept happening, enough of this new science coming to the fore. It was an incredible focus in advanced therapies in this area. And what we knew at that point, and still is true today, is that these products were being developed on first generation lab scale technologies. They're using bags, they're using tea flasks, they're using old technology that was developed for transplant medicine, regen med. None of these tools are fit for purpose to get this industry where it needs to go in the next 10 years. So it was very clear that the innovation was lacking in this industry to support this kind of growth opportunity in personalized, living medicines. And it was fundamentally different from where biopharma had been for the last 30 years. So we make lots of tablets in one place. We stamp them out of chemicals. They go into bottles. They go into pallets. They go to pharmacies. They go to distribution centers. They go to pharmacies. That was the supply chain. Then we did biologics, and we have, it took us 20 years to get to these giant tanks of biological medicines that turn into biologics. But at that point, we're making small g generic medicines, right? So any one of those tablets and any one of those doses of a biologic can go to you, it can go to me, it can go to anyone else. It goes out through the supply chain. It is generic to any patient. It is not at all specific to that particular patient. So what we do here is we take your immune cells, we take them from you at the hospital, we send them through a manufacturing process and a supply chain, and they return that singular dose, those exact cells that have been genetically modified and usually grown up into large numbers, back to you. And it only works for you. It wouldn't work for me or for anyone else. So this idea that we have now a living medicine, because we have to keep the cells alive through that process, and it's also personalized just to you with a circular supply chain. It starts with you and ends with you, is a totally new paradigm for the industry. We've never had to do anything like this before. And so we've been figuring it out, trying to apply the lessons from biologics, learning the painful way that it doesn't work anywhere near the same way, and that we can't apply the same rules to it. And now we've reached a point, we're 7 to 8 years post the first approval of a cell therapy. There's now 8, I believe, approved cell therapies. And just this year, for the very first time, we'll treat 10,000 patients in 1 year. We've treated a little over 35,000 patients in total in the last 7 years across now 8 different indications. So we just haven't, the kind of inflection point for me in the journey with Ori was, I learned that there were cures for cancer. And then I learned that basically patients couldn't get access to them because they were too expensive and too hard to make. And I just said, well, that's just an untenable outcome. That just can't happen. And so, kind of threw my hat in the ring and said, well, let's go. Let's see if we can help fix this. And I think this incredible modality has a huge and exciting future to cure not only all different types of cancer in which it's being studied, both liquid and solid tumors, things very in the hardest, to reach diseases like ovarian cancer, prostate, pancreatic, lung, there's really kind of deadly diseases which don't have great, brain, glioblastoma, like all these diseases. 10 million people a year are diagnosed with cancer globally. Another 10 million people a year die of cancer every year. There's a huge potential impact that we can have if we can get these cures into the clinic and get them to patients at scale at an affordable price that could be accessed not only in the Western world, but everywhere in the world. And that's Ori's mission as a company, which is, as I said, easy to get out of bed for in the morning and feel like you're doing something important.
I like hearing that. I'm thinking about you seeing like your DC experience, seeing how the sausage is made, and then having kind of like the Medco experience, kind of seeing, like I said, I'm preclinical guy, but you saw everything like with the supply chain, everything you just described, like, pressing the pill, like putting in the bottles.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm going to imagine that kind of was like something you're like, this needs to get better if we're going to actually have, and dude in the lab like me, I'm like, I don't know, I'm just working on the tech. Like,
I'll just micropipetting.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep pipetting like that. But there's a kind of this downstream kind of exposure that you had, which I was like, definitely, I'm going to imagine informs a lot of this and your willingness to get in the arena and do the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think and we still suffer from that today. Like, process development scientists, research scientists, people doing translation in academic research and or in, pharmaceutical companies are not thinking about the end game. They are not thinking about what's the cost of this product going to be and how do I get it to patients? Because it's not their job. Their job is to say, does this work? Is there a safety signal in here somewhere? Is this an efficacious, medicine? But ultimately, the hard lesson we've learned with cell therapy is that you can have great science and highly, highly clinically effective medicine that still can't reach patients because we didn't think about these things early enough. And we try and scale up a lab scale process using old tools. It doesn't work, no matter how many billions we spend on it. And so I've been talking a lot in the last kind of year, 18 months about elevating commercial viability up alongside safety and efficacy. We've always been focused on safety and efficacy preclinically. That's the core, North Stars for us as an industry. But for cell therapy in particular, we can no longer assume that if it works, it'll get covered and we can make it and we can treat enough patients with it, because those things have proven not to be the case. So we have to be thinking about this other element, this commercial viability piece early, and getting scientists and process developers to care about that stuff is hard. So, if you're a researcher and you want to spin out a company, you want to get VC funding, you want to partner an asset, these are questions that you need the answer to. You cannot say that will be Pfizer's problem, that will be J&J's problem, that will be Novartis's problem, because they've already inherited those products and have failed with them, and they're not accepting that problem anymore.
Yep.
So what we've tried to build at Ori is a platform that's flexible enough to be used in the scientific research lab at the very early phases. But if it happens to hit and you get those safety and efficacy tick marks or check marks done, you've also got commercial viability because the platform will scale with you. So you no longer have to worry about that. If you use this, then you sort of tick that box already. But if you're continuing to develop in a flask or a bag or whatever you're doing today, you're almost doomed to failure no matter what you do, no matter how clinically effective your product is, which is terrible for patients. It's terrible for drug developers, terrible for investors. It's everybody loses in that scenario.
Absolutely. And I think about that kind of dichotomy where it's just like, the kind of the downstream kind of like viability is kind of like an afterthought. I'm like, why is this an afterthought? Like, there's only so much money that can be spent, and like if this is so untenable that like no one can afford it, all of this was moot. Like
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the funny thing that I often kind of reflect on is I've never talked to a single PI or an investigator or someone leading a clinical trial who says, I don't really care if this product makes it to patients.
Yeah,
every single person is there for that reason.
Yeah.
The fact that the decisions that we make early, which seem benign in the early phase, like, okay, we don't have to worry about cost of goods right now. We're just going to kind of, that's someone else's problem later, actually could be the differentiator of what actually allows the product to reach patients and get market access and do what you want it to do or not. It's not necessarily whether it has 97% efficacy versus 93% efficacy or whatever, which is what we've been thinking about, for the last couple of decades. So it is. I mean, it's one of those things that, we all want the same thing. Human beings respond to incentives. We have to create the right incentive structures for people to realize that this is something they have to care about, and all that work. I think part of it also is that, drug discovery is such a Hail Mary anyway. You're sort of like, I've got a 7% chance of the product that I'm developing ever making it to market anyway. So I've got so many things to worry about.
Yeah.
The other 93% of the outcome, that this is just one more thing. But it's an important thing that people need to really focus on.
Absolutely. And I think to get back to what you mentioned about like the healthcare, pharma, like kind of therapeutic industry not doing a great job of like doing PR, is that element that you're describing of like this minuscule chance of getting this drug approved and also being commercially viable are truly miracles.
That's
how
right.
are we up there with tobacco? Like, how are we compared to tobacco? Like how? Like
I know.
it's just like all of this, and
Mind-boggling.
I think about it, and it reminds me that like it's like similar to like material science too, where like it looks great in like pilot scale. And then once you start getting into like commercial scale, everything just starts like the wheels fall off.
That's
And
right.
you're
That's
like,
what I said.
like holy
Yeah,
crap.
we have the tools to get the biology out for 10 patients. Like we can do
Yeah.
it for clinical trial. We just can't do it for 10,000. And that
Yep.
ultimately is where success lies, is the bridge between 10 and 10,000.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
hopefully we can act as part of the solution to that bigger problem.
Yeah. And so with your product launch, can you talk a little bit about, this seems to be a pretty big paradigm shift for, the space. You're now introducing, which was like in bags, no longer in bags. Here's a tool that's like more scalable than this. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to the go-to-market for your product? Like, how are you, I'm going to imagine there's a lot of education too that you have to do with like the folks who are like, I've never seen this before, like ever. Like, how do you kind of cross that chasm?
Yeah, I mean, it's another 2-hour podcast we could probably do on this one topic.
Yeah.
I think, we worked very hard from 2018, 19 when I joined the business, establishing Ori as a credible source, a partner to the industry. The players who are in the industry today with the first generation technologies, the nomenclature tells a story. They're vendors. The therapy developers think of them as vendors, and that's the bottom of the relationship pyramid, is just someone I go to buy stuff. They have no value beyond selling me stuff. And so we have worked very hard to move our way up the relationship pyramid, providing value beyond products, because we haven't had any products. So we've had to figure out a way to be relevant without products for several years while we were developing it. And so a lot of that has to do with our approach, our brand, our purpose, our mission, the things that we stand for, the things we believe in, the data we put out there in the world to get credibility. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort getting credibility for 3 or 4 years before we ever launched our first product. And I think that was an investment that was well worth making because we enter the market now with our first product in a differentiated place from where most of the industry has been at that kind of vendor level. And this goes back to not only products, the product that we've developed, the Eero platform, is best in class. It delivers best in class results. It looks great. It looks like it was developed by Apple. It's pleasing to the eye. It does what it says it's going to do. All those things are true, but it goes far beyond the products. It actually goes very, very deeply back into culture. Is what do we believe our role in this is? We are enabling our partners to gain widespread patient access for their life-saving therapies. That is our mission as a company. We are supporting the industry, and our goal is to support them and enable them to do these great, incredible things and cure these intractable diseases. And if we think about that kind of servant leadership mentality of we are here to serve the industry, we are here to partner to help them get to the big goal that we all want to achieve, you behave differently. You behave differently in the way you interact. You turn up to meetings differently. We hear feedback. The Ori team turns up prepared They turned up ready to add value. They add value in ways that others don't. Like this is like music to my ears. I love this stuff. This is the way we position ourselves because that's our job. Our job is to support you, the pioneers, the heroes of cell therapy that are developing these products, and to help you get to the end game. And if we sort of take that position to market in everything we do, not just the way our product looks, the way it operates and its usability, but how we answer the phone, how we handle customer complaints, how our sales team behaves, all of these things, our marketing messaging. Are we promoting ourselves or are we promoting the field and the ability to impact patients' lives? And so everything that we do kind of has that cultural element embedded in it. And that will pay dividends. I firmly believe it. It's a little bit, I think, touchy-feely for several members of my board and probably others who, maybe haven't seen what I've seen, but I strongly believe that, that ethos within the company is that we're here for the patients. Every company that works in healthcare says we put patients first. And for most companies, it's just simply not true. And I've always said to our team, like, our culture, I will never put our guiding principles or our values up on the wall because then they become a showpiece. They don't actually get lived. They're just there. They're there for show. Culture is what happens in the water cooler. It's what happens in the hallways. It's what happens in those hard meetings. That's culture. And those things are the things that we want to make sure that we're doing, with every interaction, with every opportunity to demonstrate that we are a credible partner and someone that can help solve the biggest problems for the industry and for our therapy developers out there who are developing these cures. And that's what Ori's all about. And I'm super proud of what we built. I'm incredibly proud of the team and the challenges that we've overcome and the potential for us to have massive impact on patient access for cell therapies over the next couple decades.
That's super awesome. And like, again, just like another fist pump moment, because I feel the exact same way. Like, Exceeder is a leasing company. Leasing as a business model is a tale as old as time. They're like, people have been leasing things, but we're super weird in that we only serve laboratories in the life sciences. So it's like oftentimes people are like, do you guys do yellow iron, like construction? No. You guys do aviation? No. You guys can do a fleet of cars? No, we don't. And we take great pride in it. Like, because
that's right. We just do that. We do it.
We
really
just
well.
do this. Like, this is all we do is lab equipment. And but it comes back to, like, we're here to serve the scientific community to accelerate the path and pace in which we can get these miracles across the line.
Yeah.
And for us, we realize that's like, that's perhaps not what Wall Street wants to hear. Like, they're like, what about the TAM? Like, the TAM could be so much bigger.
Yeah.
But for us, we're making a conscious decision to take a smaller TAM, but a TAM we really care about, and go in deep. And I think exactly what you said is, like, when you keep that at the forefront, like, that is a true, like, I don't think that's fluff, honestly. I think that's for real. Because at the end of the day, we were talking about at the very, very beginning, it's like the people buy from people and people partner with people. And do you want to just be that vendor where there's like, oh, this is the bill that I need to pay? Or is this someone that you can rely on and know that your values are aligned? Because, like, when things, like with every partnership, things also get tough too. Like, are you going to do the right thing? It's kind of that thing where you would hope that whoever you partner with will do the right thing. But if you don't establish those, like, ground rules, your partners might not know, and they just treat you like any other vendor. So I truly believe what you're kind of building is critically important to that. And I'm going to imagine definitely facilitates more productive, engaged conversation with these partners that you're striving to partner with.
Absolutely. It's just a deeper level of engagement. I mean, people, the very top of the relationship pyramid is trusted advisor. And people will say, oh, we're trusted advisors to our clients. The definition of trusted advisor is your customer or your client doesn't do anything in your domain of expertise without consulting you first. How many of your relationships can you say that is true for? I'm guessing very, very few, because it is incredibly difficult to build that level of trust to where you get to that status. So we have to earn that. And by showing up every day in a differentiated fashion, by bringing value, by being responsive, by being customer obsessed, these are the things we think about. And we will get there. We will earn the right to be a trusted advisor to our customers and our partners in the bigger journey. But it's a journey for sure. It's not It's not
It's
easy to
not
get
built
there.
overnight.
And,
It's
and,
like,
and you're right. Maximizing short-term revenues and profits is often in direct conflict to that. A great example of from the COVID era is just-in-time supply chains, right? Great for working capital. We carry 30 days of inventory on the books, and it arrives from whenever we need. It arrives from China whenever we need it. It's all working great. This is our CFO loves it. As soon as that supply chain gets disrupted, you've got rubber gloves and pipette tips and gas removal bags that are a core part of the bioprocessing supply chain that are no longer around. People had to stop clinical trials because they couldn't get a gas removal bag. People died because we couldn't continue those clinical trials. I refuse to make that trade-off. I refuse to, and I might get fired over it one day, who knows? But I refuse to make that trade-off. We're going to carry enough inventory to make sure that we can and have a business continuity plan that allows for us to supply our partners that we're committed to supplying and to partnering with. And that is not going to be a very popular decision with, my future CFO or whoever it is whose job it is to manage the numbers. But, it's like some of these things you have to stand for something. Your business has to believe in something. If it's just a black box that prints money, there's a lot of black boxes that print money. What does it stand for?
Absolutely. And I always think about it as like, if you have a long time horizon, this all makes sense. It's like, right? It all makes sense because like if you're building for resilience, and like I always think about vendor relations, like I've been squeezed as a vendor before, like, and I was like, never will I do that to my vendors. Like when someone tried to bully me to like, you're going to take this net 180. I'm like, what?
Well,
like,
how do you work with Big Pharma, have you?
Yeah. I know. But it's like, you can imagine you can live in a world where you like everyone wants to partner with you because you're not trying to eke out a minor working capital gain, right? Like it would mean the world to every smaller company if just you paid net 30. I'm using working capital as an example, right? Like,
no, I know exactly. Right.
It's like, can you just pay it net 30 and then that way I can reinvest in my business to help
also,
you?
It's a mindset, right? One of the businesses I used to work for essentially ran a negative working capital margin because their receivables were on 30 days and their payables were on 120 days. So they ran a negative working capital margin. Yeah, fantastic for business, for the leverage in the business. Who hated working with them? Every single one of their vendors hated working with them. And so, at the end of the day, what is good for your business is having vendors that are financially viable, that live up to their word, that like working with you, that deliver on their commitments, that view you as a partner. Those are important things. And an extra 30 days or 60 days on the working capital margin, again, use that example, what you want is healthy suppliers and partners and vendors downstream in your supply chain that help you do your business. And so putting terms to them that work for their business makes sense. It's good business. But unfortunately, sometimes we forget these things in the way.
Yeah. And I think it's just for anyone that's listening out there, just like, I encourage you to think about it from this angle. Like in a textbook, it's like, we want this negative cash conversion cycle. That's the best. But I encourage you to think about it from the other perspective of how can we make it sustainable and resilient for everyone, all the stakeholders. And it doesn't have to be zero sum win-loss type situation. And exactly what you said about culture being something that you got to show up every day. This is an element of culture. Like that's culture. Like we're not writing on the walls, we give customers net 30. Like that's not it. You're just doing it, right? You're just like, I support those who are on this journey with us.
Our team. Exactly.
Our team, like it's internal, external, and it's like every day showing up and living it. And just like people can experience that. And it's infectious. Like, and if you, like you said, like I don't agree with just like throwing up the values, just like on your wall and just calling it a day, because that's not it. That's just like
that's the bare minimum. You think your employees don't see if you're screwing your vendors and you get a chance to screw your team out of a few extra bucks to pad the bottom line, you're not going to do it. Yeah, of course you are. So, it's like you have to be, it's either real or it's not real. And I interview every person that gets hired at Ori. I'm the last interview, and I only interview for cultural fit. I can't judge whether they're going to be a great scientist in the lab. I'm just not qualified. But I can tell them about what the organization that we're trying to build and what we believe in. And, I use this example. I say a lot of companies say they're a family. And you and I both know that they're not a family. You don't go cutting the bottom 20% of your family when you miss earnings. These are businesses. And it's just disingenuous to say that we're a family because we all know it's not true. The way I view Ori is we're a professional sports team. I'm the manager and I want the best player at every position. And so the sum of the parts, the team is stronger than the individuals that make up the team. At some point, if I'm not the right manager to get the most out of this team, I'll be replaced. This is a fact of life, and this came from No Rules Rules. Is the ideas that Reed Hastings has taught me through his writing. But being very upfront about that, like we have a big purpose, we share that purpose, we trust each other, we build, we coach, we're a team, and we're going to look out for each other. But at the end of the day, you have to know this is a business. This is a business that we want high talent density. We want performance out of. We drive for performance, and that's what's expected. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that this is a family and you can just coast and not add any value because it's not the case. But having that up front in that conversation is part of the culture. Being open and being transparent. So hopefully that's useful for someone out there who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are tons of folks out there who are kind of like making these pivotal hiring decisions early. And
sure.
It's like you, I also am doing the culture check on interviews. People are surprised when I do the screeners. Yeah. People are like, who am I talking to? Like, oh, you're talking to the CEO founder. And they're like, oh, shit. I was like, but I'm like, don't worry. I was like, this is normal for us. But and I think too, like something about the kind of the aspect of culture like permeating, it's like those early hires too. Like if you get the culture right, it's kind of like an exponential function where you're more likely to get better cultural fits. But if you slack off on it and you let someone that's like perhaps not a fit for the culture, it also like goes in the other direction where that starts to go viral and your culture starts to get diluted. So like for anyone out there who's like, I guess, I don't know if there's a better way to say it, but just like, if you're not taking this kind of culture check and screening early seriously, I encourage you to do it because there are times when, especially when you're growing fast, where if you let it you ease up on it and you kind of let the filter get a little bit just like, there's no more filter, you're not going to recognize the culture or the company, when you scale from like 10 to like 50.
And it'll ruin the company. I mean, I think ultimately the culture, the alignment is the most important thing. That's why the team does what they do. It's why they work so hard. It's why they care about what they do. And it permeates everything, permeates every interaction. It permeates the quality of the output. And an emphasis on culture is absolutely critical in my view.
Totally. Well, Jason, I'm so pumped up for Ori. Like, this is freaking awesome. And I'm like, it's like, again, I was like living my little preclinical bubble, but like learning about the intricacies of like, okay, what does that actually mean on the other side was incredibly insightful. And I love your perspective on culture, because I think sometimes people can just say, that's fluff. But we're like, I love that we're just like, no, not fluff, very, very real. And, I can't wait for, your product launch and getting that thing into the clinic and, just being on the sidelines, like rooting for you guys and watching your guys' journey. And in traditional closing, I guess actually before the closing questions, what's in store for you and Ori in the next like 1 to 2 years?
I probably end up saying this every year, but when you're in a exciting startup scale up, like 2025 is really going to be the most exciting year for Ori yet. I mean, we're going to be working with somewhere between 10 and 15 therapy developers in 2025, both with their CDMO partners and also with the developers themselves and their own teams and their labs. And we should fingers crossed, treat our first patient in a clinical trial in the second half of 2025, which is why we've been working so hard for the last 6 years. To get this done. So I always, so I've got a bottle of champagne that's been waiting for 5 years in the fridge for that first patient that gets treated with a therapy that's been manufactured on a neuro system. So that's the super exciting element for us. And, I think the the industry really needs a next generation infrastructure provider, someone that's going to really build out the infrastructure necessary for this next generation of medicines. And Ori wants to be that. We're starting with the Eero platform as our first product, but we have partnerships upstream and downstream with organizations on the physical infrastructure side, like a germ-free and a GCon. We've got partners like a Benchling or a Traxcell on the software side, L7. We're building out these relationships with research centers like MD Anderson, Mayo Clinic. We will build out an ecosystem that can support this next generation of therapy development, of clinical trials, and ultimately of commercialization, and much, much lower cost at much, much higher throughput and availability. And that is the big vision for us. That's, in 2 years, we'll be a totally different company, really helping to provide a more comprehensive solution to the industry and into our next wave of R&D and innovation, which is a super exciting thing to think about.
I'm stoked for you guys. And I mean, it's amazing to think about just like seeing the culmination of work come to a head. and you're talking about just like the early days about just having to establish kind of, we were differentiated, even pre-product, like we are differentiated, we're different. And now you're actually seeing the product launch and actually having it starting to impact patients. So that's amazing to hear. And likewise, my team usually is just like, Jon, you say this every year. The next year is going to be amazing.
The best year ever.
Yeah, it's going to be the best year. It's like, what else? I'm not going to say like, this is going to be the worst year.
That's right. Next year is going to be shit.
Yeah, this is going to be awful.
But, 2023 was way better.
Exactly. The best is behind us, everybody. Like the best is behind us now. Like we just call it.
Not quite as motivating.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the two traditional closing questions, first is, would you like to give any shout out to anyone who supported you along the way?
Ooh, wow, so many folks. I mentioned him earlier. I think one of my mentors, I didn't call him out by name, but Adrian has been a fantastic mentor for me, teaching me about life and business and rapport building and sales skills and all those things we talked about. And being your authentic self at work. And, he's been a fantastic support, and, the fantastic team at Ori, Farland, Chris, who invited me on this journey with them. They took a big risk on me. I'd never done this before. I mean, you've never really done this thing before. I'd done some things before, but we've really, thrown our hats in the ring together as partners and built this thing from the ground up, which has been awesome. And, their trust means the world to me. And, I couldn't have done any of it without my wife in particular, who I think I mentioned, I left her abandoned in the US with a two-year-old and a 5 months pregnant to let me go to Europe and start a new role that led to our life here. So there's just so many people that impact your journey and your trajectory, both professionally and personally. And I've been very, very fortunate. I'm one of those people that have few friends, but, very deep friendships, and as I don't know about you, but as only children, often those friends, you get those kind of deep bonds that you might have with a sibling, brother or sister, and those friends have been decades old, and so I think they've all had a small hand in shaping the outcome of me sitting here today.
Absolutely, I feel the exact same way too. Exactly, that's how I feel about my close friends. It's like they feel like siblings, honestly.
Yeah, they're my brothers. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned how about like bringing authentic self to be at work. This is on the lighter note, but we're late to the game, but my wife and I just finished Severance on app, which is about the mind splitting of like work and personal. It's like, this looks nightmarish. Like this sounds awful, and I was like, oh, is this like an allegory for like not actually being able to do that and bring your authentic self? But incredibly important. And then the last question is, if you can give any advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
Don't worry so much about the future. I think, as high performers in life and people that want to do, great things, you get very stressed out about, how do I get to the outcome? And it's all about the outcome, and you forget to enjoy the process, the journey. And it took me too long, most people don't believe me when I say this, but I'm actually an introvert. And so it, simply means, as you know, it's like, where do you get your energy? From interacting with people or being by yourself. I get my energy from being by myself. I can flex to an extrovert, which you've seen me do for the last 2 hours.
Yeah.
But I think, the introvert in me undervalued the importance of human relationships. It's all about the people. That's all that matters. The rest of it's just noise. The people, the relationships you make, the reputation you build, being there for friends, colleagues. They're what makes the difference. The people at Ori are what make the difference of working with them, learning from them, being part of their team. That's what makes the difference. And the people are really what matter. The rest of the outcomes will take care of themselves. And if you work hard and you do the right thing by people, the outcomes will take care of themselves. You don't have to worry so much about trying to direct to the outcome. So I think that would be a great lesson for a younger me. If I could buy a time machine somewhere.
Yeah, and I think about my 21-year-old self too. That is definitely what I would need to hear as well, because I was just so incredibly preoccupied with always not. I was just I felt like at times I wasn't even present, because I was just thinking about that future outcome state.
Yeah, you're thinking 5 years away or 10 years away, not about today.
Yeah,
don't miss today. Yeah,
exactly. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time. This has been a blast. I could keep going on and on and on and on. And I realize that on your side, it is far later than over here in San Francisco. So thank you for being so generous. I learned a lot, had a blast, and honestly can't wait for the listeners to tune into this one, because it was jam packed with tons of useful lessons. And maybe I'm sure there are 21-year-olds out there who will actually be able to don't have to create a time machine and actually can take it and implement it in their journey.
I hope so. If there's only one out there that we've reached him or her and helped them think about that's a great outcome. So I've really enjoyed it as well, and look forward. I'll be in San Francisco for JP Morgan week in whatever that is, 8 weeks away, and love to meet in 3 dimensions for a coffee if you have time, and make a real human connection instead of a two-dimensional one.
We sometimes forget that there's there's the human analog element to all of this. So I'm game. Clearly, I don't leave San Francisco, so give me a shout and we can grab a coffee. Thanks again, Jason.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast. We hope you enjoyed our 2-part series with Jason Foster. If you did, consider subscribing, leaving us a review, and sharing it with your friends. Be sure to join us for our next series. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceedr.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.